1. Introduction: The feedback loop from hell. One day, we find ourselves trapped in a cycle of thoughts, realizing how easily they can spiral out of control. That moment arrives when a seemingly simple event starts to grow, unnecessarily bothering us, and everything begins to take a turn for the worse. This is exactly where Mark Manson's concept, the feedback loop from hell, comes into play. The story begins with a situation we are all too familiar with. In the ordinary flow of daily life, something happens: a friend, a colleague, or even a stranger criticizes you. Maybe it's something you said or did that was misunderstood, and it bothers you. At that moment, you want to defend yourself or clear up the misunderstanding. But the interesting part is, this small discomfort suddenly turns into something bigger. You start getting mad at yourself for being bothered. I shouldn't have cared so much, you think. Yet, the more you think about it, the more you care. Feeling uncomfortable about your discomfort pulls you deeper into a downward spiral. We feel bad about feeling bad, we get anxious about our anxiety, Manson says. And this loop grows. A simple event suddenly drags you into a greater sense of unhappiness. Why? Because we care too much about everything. We believe we need to be perfect. We think everything we do must be right, appropriate, and acceptable. But Manson flips this assumption on its head. To truly focus on what matters in life, you need to let go of what doesn't, he says. This loop shows itself again and again every time something happens in our lives. A small mistake, a failure, or a negative comment can quickly turn into a storm in our minds. And this storm creates a series of emotions that make us feel inadequate. Am I not good enough? Did I fail? These questions fill our minds, and the questions themselves become yet another problem. This is where Manson's feedback loop from hell comes into play. To better understand this, imagine a scenario at work. Let's say you're working on a project with your colleagues, and everything seems fine. But one morning, your boss criticizes a decision you made earlier. At that moment, you feel a little uncomfortable, but instead of addressing the discomfort, you start thinking, why did this bother me? Why can't I handle criticism better? The discomfort grows, turning into anger, and ruins your day. Manson argues that the only way out of this loop is to stop caring so much about everything. Caring too much about everything only stresses you out, he says. As humans, we often fall into the trap of chasing constant happiness. But the ironic thing is, the more we chase happiness, the unhappier we become. Why? Because we turn the pursuit of happiness into yet another problem. We start asking, why am I not happy? And this question only amplifies the unhappiness we already feel. Another key point Manson makes is bold. Constantly wanting more only leads to more disappointment. Everything we desire, everything we want to achieve, actually brings with it more problems. What we don't have makes us restless, but the real issue is that, until we focus on what we already have, the desire for more will always be a source of stress. In this story, Manson's solution is simple and clear. Set your boundaries. Stop giving too much meaning to everything in your life. We don't need to be experts in everything or be perfect in every situation. Sometimes, it's okay to focus on just a few things and let go of the rest. Because letting go is one of the most effective ways to find inner peace. If we take everything too seriously, in the end, we won't be able to do anything well. One way to escape this loop is to accept the inevitable challenges of life. Embrace the pain, Manson says. Pain, challenges, and failures are inevitable parts of life. Facing these truths is far more liberating than denying them. We cannot be happy at all times, and expecting to be is unrealistic. Happiness isn't the absence of pain, it's the ability to exist despite it. According to Manson, the path to happiness lies in being able to accept not just the good but also the bad. Our story doesn't end here, in fact, it's just beginning. As Manson repeatedly emphasizes throughout his book, you can't care about everything. It will only exhaust you. Choosing what really matters in your life and letting go of everything else may be the simplest and most effective way to live a more peaceful life. In short, the only way out of this loop is to learn not to care so much about everything. Instead of trying to control every little detail of your life, learning to let things flow may bring you one step closer to real freedom. Care less, live more freely, says Manson. And perhaps, this advice is the very thing we need most in today's modern world. Imagine that throughout your life, You've been constantly chasing success, striving for more, aiming to achieve the best grades, land the top job, and gain the approval of everyone around you. We all try to succeed in one way or another. But in the Don't Try chapter, Mark Manson reveals the irony behind this. Success doesn't come from constantly trying and pushing. The real key lies in letting go and embracing failure. True success comes when you stop trying and start accepting, Manson says. This doesn't mean giving up entirely. The point is to stop forcing things and to let go of the pressure to be perfect at everything. Because that pressure only feeds the fear of failure. And success doesn't thrive on fear. Success comes when you move forward fearlessly. In this chapter, Manson clearly lays out how the greatest enemy of success is the fear of failure. That fear immobilizes us, breaks our courage, and prevents us from reaching our potential. But the interesting thing is, once you let go of the fear of failure, you open the door to real success. Failure is the way forward, Manson reminds us. In fact, failure strengthens and toughens you. Let's think of a story. Imagine someone who has spent their entire life focused on being successful. John has always tried to be the best, get the highest grades, land the top job, and earn the admiration of those around him. But this constant effort has only brought him exhaustion and anxiety. Why? Because while trying to control everything, John is haunted by the fear of failure. Even though people see him as successful, deep down, he feels inadequate. This is the price of constantly trying and chasing everything. Manson's message is simple: learn to let go. John eventually realizes this truth. He understands that he can't control everything in life and that he doesn't need to succeed at every single thing. This acceptance brings him freedom. Letting go is one of the biggest steps toward success. Letting go isn't weakness. In fact, it's the courage to accept your limits and recognize your own strength. The more you try, the less you succeed, Manson says. Because constant effort stems from a sense of lack. The mindset of "I need to achieve more" only reinforces the idea that what you have is not enough. Now, imagine another story, this time about failure. Think of Emily, someone who has been searching for a job for a long time. She's been to countless interviews and faced multiple rejections. Each rejection has worn her down, making her feel inadequate and almost ready to give up. But one day, she discovers Manson's philosophy. Failure is not the end, it can be the beginning of something new. The next time Emily goes into an interview, she approaches it differently. She's no longer afraid of failing. If she gets rejected, she doesn't see it as a personal failure but as a learning experience. And eventually, this new mindset leads her to real success. She's no longer driven by fear but by a willingness to learn. When we accept the possibility of failure, that's when we become free, Manson says. Because once you accept the potential for failure, you find the courage to act. Fear-based action only limits us and stops us from doing our best. But embracing the chance of failure opens up new creative paths, new ways of thinking, and, ultimately, new opportunities for success. Manson's Don't Try philosophy is a direct challenge to modern society's obsession with success. Everyone is constantly chasing bigger goals and higher achievements, but this pursuit is based on an illusion. Success doesn't come from relentless effort. It comes from knowing when to let go and accepting failure as part of the journey. Sometimes, quitting is the quickest way to win, Manson boldly claims. John and Emily's stories reflect this philosophy in real life. Once a person realizes that constant effort and the need to succeed in everything is impossible, that's when real success is within reach. Because success doesn't come from forcing. It comes from letting go and trusting the process. In the end, Manson's Don't Try chapter teaches us that the path to success is not about trying harder, it's about knowing when to stop. Success comes when you embrace your fears, let go of the pressure to be perfect, and have the courage to fail. You can only achieve success by not being afraid to fail, Manson writes. And this message, which goes against the conventional understanding of success, is one that liberates and frees us from the endless chase. 3. Happiness is a problem. Throughout our lives, we spend so much time chasing happiness that we often fail to realize how misleading that pursuit can be. In the chapter titled Happiness is a Problem, Mark Manson touches on exactly this issue. He shows how the pursuit of happiness can actually make us more miserable and reveals that constant happiness is, in fact, an illusion. Manson illustrates this paradox in our lives through examples that make it clear. We all believe that happiness is a goal, an end result. But the more we chase after it, the more we get it wrong. Happiness isn't the final destination we think it is, it's merely a side effect, says Manson. Happiness comes as a natural result of our experiences, not something that needs to be chased constantly. Imagine this: you've spent your whole life aiming to be happy. Perhaps you've tied your happiness to having more money, a better job, or the perfect relationship. Each time you achieve one of these, you feel a fleeting sense of happiness, but then it fades, leaving an emptiness behind. This is what Manson calls the happiness trap. Chasing happiness will only make you want more, he says. This cycle, like an illusion, keeps you constantly running after something, but never truly satisfied. Let's take a story. James is a successful businessman. He has a great career, a big house, and what seems like a perfect life. But James is always searching for more money, a higher title, more luxury. Every time he achieves something new, he feels happy for a short while, but soon, a bigger emptiness grows within him. External success doesn't guarantee happiness because happiness is an internal process, he says. What James fails to realize is that he is searching for happiness in the wrong place. Manson explains how the constant search for happiness leads us into an illusion, reminding us that life is full of ups and downs, and that's part of the natural process. Life is full of highs and lows, and expecting to be happy all the time is just an illusion, he says. Trying to be happy all the time means ignoring life's challenges, pains, and failures. But true happiness arises when we embrace those challenges. Now, let's look at another story. Sarah spent her whole life chasing happiness. When she went through tough times, she blamed herself. "Why am I not happy?" she asked. "What am I doing wrong?" Happiness had become a goal for her, and when she couldn't always reach it, she felt inadequate. But Manson explains how misleading this mindset is. Understanding that happiness isn't a constant state is liberating, he says. When Sarah realized that it was impossible to be happy all the time, she started showing herself more compassion. She no longer punished herself for being unhappy. She accepted that those emotions were part of life too. In this chapter, Manson emphasizes that life isn't just about happiness, but also filled with challenges and struggles. The key is to embrace those difficulties instead of avoiding them. True happiness arises when we accept challenges, he says. Running from pain only makes it grow. But accepting pain, and continuing to live despite it, brings us true peace and happiness. In conclusion, the Happiness is a Problem chapter shows that happiness isn't a goal to be constantly chased, but an illusion that misleads us. Manson argues that happiness is a natural outcome of life, but it's never the ultimate purpose. Instead of always searching for happiness, he advocates learning to accept the struggles we encounter in life. Don't try to achieve happiness, instead, embrace the pain, he says. Because happiness comes when we continue to live despite the difficulties. With this awareness, when we understand that happiness is a byproduct and not something we need to chase, life becomes much more meaningful and balanced. As Manson puts it, to find happiness, you must first stop looking for it. You are not special. Many of us grew up believing that we were special. As children, we were often told how talented we were, that one day we would achieve great things. This idea, deep down, made us feel different and superior to others. But Mark Manson, in the chapter titled "You Are Not Special," breaks this illusion with a harsh reality. You're not that special. At first, this may sound cold and harsh, but according to Manson, accepting that you are average and embracing your ordinariness is one of the most important steps in personal growth. Manson points out that modern society, especially young people, are constantly being told that everyone is special and unique. However, this idea doesn't lead to greater happiness or success. In fact, it often leads to ego problems. If everyone is special, then no one is special, Manson says. If everyone thinks they are exceptional, it loses its meaning entirely. Let's begin with John's story. John grew up believing he was special. Everyone told him how talented he was, how bright his future would be. But as John grew older, he began to feel crushed by these expectations. He had to be the best, the most successful, the smartest. This constant pressure caused him stress and anxiety. Eventually, when he couldn't live up to these expectations, he started feeling inadequate and worthless. This is where Manson reveals the truth. The pressure to be special can actually lead to failure. According to Manson, this idea of being special is a trap. It drives people to reject the idea of being average. But the truth of life is that most of us are ordinary. We live among millions of people, and many of our talents, achievements, and lives are average. Yet, Manson explains this by saying, success isn't only about talent. Sometimes being average is just a part of life. Manson's point in this chapter is that being average is a reality of life, and accepting it can free us. People often want to see themselves as more special or different than others. But these expectations only lead to disappointment. Constantly seeing yourself as better or different from others feeds your ego. But ego is the biggest obstacle to real success and happiness, Manson says. Ego drives us to believe we are superior to others. We think we are more talented, smarter, or more successful than everyone else. But this mindset leads to disappointment and isolation. The reality is, we can be average in some areas and even fail in others. Accepting yourself as an ordinary person brings great relief and freedom, says Manson. Being able to accept failure, knowing you're not perfect, leads to a more realistic understanding of life. Manson argues that being average isn't a weakness, but a fact. Most people will never achieve great things. Most will do ordinary work, and that's perfectly okay, he says. Accepting mediocrity frees us from the pressures of ego and the constant pursuit of success. And ironically, this acceptance can lead to real success. Because once a person accepts being average, they stop living according to others' expectations and start living according to their own desires. In conclusion, the You Are Not Special chapter serves as a manifesto questioning people's tendency to see themselves as more special than they are and explains how being average is actually not a bad thing. Manson frees us from the trap of ego and invites us to accept life more realistically. We can all be average, and that doesn't make us any less valuable, he says. True value lies in being able to accept ourselves as we are. Facing the realities of life and accepting that we are average is one of the most important steps in personal growth. As Manson puts it, being average is the first step to letting go of the ego and finding the real meaning of life. 5. The value of suffering. Throughout life, avoiding pain and hardship is one of the most natural instincts for many people. We all want to live a happy and problem-free life. However, Mark Manson, in the chapter titled The Value of Suffering, argues that this way of thinking is a huge misconception. He explains that pain and struggle are an inevitable part of life and that, in fact, they are what make us stronger, wiser, and more deeply human. According to Manson, suffering is a natural part of life. Nothing goes smoothly all the time, and every individual will face tough times at some point. But what really matters is how we deal with these challenges. Most people try to avoid pain, seeing it as an enemy they want to remove from their lives entirely. However, Manson argues that avoiding pain actually causes more suffering. Pain gives us valuable lessons when we embrace it, he says. Without pain, we cannot grow. Without struggles, we cannot truly learn. Let's think of a story. Tom was someone who always sought comfort and happiness in life. He chose his job, his friends, and his lifestyle based on what was easiest and most stress-free. But one day, unexpectedly, he lost his job and faced severe financial difficulties. This was a kind of pain Tom had never experienced before. At first, he resisted this situation, trying to suppress and avoid his suffering, but this only led him to deeper misery. This is where Manson's wisdom comes in. The more we avoid real pain, the more we plunge ourselves into greater suffering. When Tom finally accepted his pain, he realized how much this hardship had taught him. He learned how to manage his financial struggles, his resilience grew, and his outlook on life deepened. This is what Manson wants us to understand. Pain is the key to growth and development. Manson emphasizes that expecting to always be happy or for everything to go smoothly is unrealistic. If life were only about happiness and pleasure, there would be no growth, he says. People learn and grow the most during the hardest moments. Let's look at another story. Jessica had gone through a very difficult breakup. At first, she found it hard to cope with, constantly trying to suppress her pain. In fact, everyone's life contains a certain level of pain, struggle, and hardship. But these challenges, as unavoidable as they are also valuable. Because when we suffer, we discover our limits. When we face hardships, we learn how resilient we truly are. These experiences shape and mature us. Manson also highlights the importance of choosing what kinds of pain we are willing to endure. Life, no matter how much we try to avoid it, will always contain some level of pain and difficulty. But some people can make this pain more meaningful and valuable. For example, an athlete endures physical pain during training, but this pain brings strength and success. Similarly, a student experiences mental fatigue and stress while preparing for exams, but in the end, they gain knowledge and skills. You will inevitably suffer in life, so choose what kind of suffering you prefer, says Manson. Another crucial point is that suffering brings us closer to others. Pain makes us human and helps us empathize with others, he says. People often feel more connected to each other during the most challenging times. Hardships create a shared experience that brings us together, because we all go through them. Pain fosters emotional bonds and strengthens relationships. In conclusion, Manson's The Value of Suffering chapter highlights that pain and hardship are an inevitable part of life, and they actually carry great value. Pain helps us grow, develop, and become deeper, more empathetic humans. Don't be afraid of suffering, Manson says, because real growth is hidden within pain. When we stop resisting life's difficulties and accept them, we can become stronger, wiser, and more empathetic individuals. Pain is as much a reality of life as it is our greatest teacher. 6. You're always choosing. It can be challenging to accept that everything that happens in our lives is the result of our choices. Many people believe they have no control over their lives, thinking that events unfold beyond their will. However, in the chapter titled You're Always Choosing, Mark Manson emphasizes that everything in our lives is the result of either conscious or unconscious decisions. In reality, it's not the events themselves but how we react to them that shapes the course of our lives. Even avoiding making a choice is a choice, Manson says, highlighting the depth of personal responsibility. Manson presents a truth we should constantly remind ourselves of. Many situations in our lives are reflections of our own choices. Whether good or bad, pleasant or unpleasant, everything stems from a decision we made. Some choices are conscious, like the career we pursue or who we marry. Others are unconscious, such as how we feel or how we react to certain events. While we can't control what happens to us, we always have control over how we respond to those events. Let's imagine a story. Mike is a man who dreads going to work every morning. He hates his job, doesn't get along with his boss, and feels miserable every day he steps into the office. Yet Mike refuses to accept that this situation is his own choice. He constantly sees himself as a victim of his job. One day, while reading Manson's book, he comes across this sentence: "You choose to be happy or unhappy. It's not the situation but your response to it that shapes your life." This sentence sparks something in. Every morning, it's Mike who walks through that door. His unhappiness isn't caused by the job itself, but by his decision not to change the situation. Manson explains that making choices isn't just about big decisions. Small choices we make every day also shape who we are. Taking responsibility for your life means making every decision consciously, he says. Most people tend to blame others for the things that go wrong in their lives. But according to Manson, every challenge or problem in our lives is the result of how we respond to situations and the choices we make. Let's look at another story. Emily has been living her life based on her parents' expectations since childhood. She realizes she is unhappy and dissatisfied with her life. She feels like she's been living someone else's life all along. Yet Manson's message here is clear. You need to learn to choose your own happiness. Allowing others to direct your life is a choice too. Emily initially believed her unhappiness was caused by her parents, but she comes to realize that it was she who chose to conform to their expectations. By choosing to please them, she gave up on her own happiness. This awareness leads her to change her life completely. She starts making her own decisions and choosing her own path. Another key point Manson highlights in this chapter is the importance of taking responsibility. People often have a tendency to blame others or external factors for the misfortunes in their lives. But Manson says, you must take responsibility for everything in your life. This doesn't mean that you caused every bad thing that happens to you, but how you respond to those situations is entirely up to you. In other words, no matter what cards life deals you, how you play them is your choice. Another example might be the simple choices we make in our daily lives. At the end of a long day, you feel tired and choose not to work out. That's a choice. Or you set an alarm to wake up early but decide to go back to sleep when it rings. That's also a choice. Every small action is a choice, and these choices shape your life, Manson says. The things we do or don't do every day either move us forward or keep us stuck in the same place. One of the most important messages Manson emphasizes in this chapter is that we need to stop living passively. Choosing not to act is also a choice, he says. For example, choosing not to take action in a difficult situation is a decision, and that decision has consequences. Everything in our lives has a result, and those results are based on the choices we make or don't make. In conclusion, the chapter You're Always Choosing explains that we make conscious or unconscious choices every moment of our lives, and those choices shape the direction of our lives. Manson emphasizes the importance of taking responsibility and making conscious choices in every aspect of life, handing us the key to personal freedom. Everything in your life is the result of your choices, he says. With this awareness, we can direct our lives more consciously and take control of our own happiness. Throughout our lives, we often avoid saying no. We fear disappointing people, being excluded, or missing out on opportunities, so we find ourselves constantly saying yes. However, in the chapter titled The Importance of Saying No, Mark Manson explains how valuable it is to set boundaries and eliminate unnecessary things in life. Saying no can be more important than saying yes, Manson says. This is because the ability to say no shows the courage to choose what truly matters in life. Let's imagine a story. Emily is known as a highly successful employee at work. Everyone asks for her help, expects her to contribute to every project, and she always says yes. But after a while, Emily begins to feel exhausted and burned out. She realizes she has no time left for herself while trying to keep up with everyone. One day, while reading Manson's book, she comes across this sentence: "Every time you say yes to something, you are saying no to something else." This sentence sparks a realization for Emily. While trying to please everyone, she has been neglecting herself. Every yes she gives to others is a no she gives to her own needs. Manson highlights the liberating power of saying no. Saying no is the power to take control of your life, he says. Trying to do everything and please everyone leads to burnout. On the other hand, being able to say no means setting your boundaries and staying true to your priorities. Life is a limited process in terms of time and energy. When we say yes to everything, we lose the energy to focus on what truly matters. Another story is about Jack. Jack was the go-to person in his social circle. He attended every gathering, helped his family with every request, and accepted all the extra projects at work. But over time, Jack started to feel drained. He was spreading himself too thin, trying to meet everyone's needs, but getting no real satisfaction from anything. One day, he read this line from Manson: "Real success in life is about what you eliminate, not what you accept." Jack realized that saying yes wasn't making him happy. Instead, it was complicating his life. True happiness and balance, he understood, came from learning what to say no to. Manson emphasizes that setting boundaries is the most powerful way to filter out the unnecessary things in life. Setting boundaries is not only a responsibility to others but also to ourselves. Saying no is staying true to your values, Manson says. Every yes requires a sacrifice. If you are constantly saying yes to everything, you end up saying no to yourself, your health, your loved ones, and the things that truly matter to you. Over time, this wears you down and leads to unhappiness. At this point, one of the key messages Manson emphasizes is the importance of choosing what truly matters in life. If we say yes to everything, we won't have enough focus on anything. Choosing what's important in life starts with eliminating what's not, Manson says. This is essentially a process of simplifying life. It's about letting go of unnecessary burdens and focusing only on the things that hold the most value. Another crucial point is that saying no truly liberates us. When we say no to someone, it doesn't mean we are belittling that person or situation. On the contrary, it means we are staying true to our priorities and valuing our own time and energy. Manson sums this up beautifully by saying no is about valuing the things you say yes to. If we want to make room for the things we truly value in life, we must learn to let go of the unnecessary weight. In conclusion, the chapter The Importance of Saying No focuses on the significance of setting boundaries and eliminating unnecessary things from our lives. Manson emphasizes that being able to say no helps us live more consciously and allows us to dedicate our time and energy to what's most valuable. True freedom lies in what you say no to, Manson says. With this awareness, a person can live a more meaningful and balanced life. 8. Failure is the way forward. The fear of failure holds many people back from taking action. Most of us are afraid of making mistakes, taking wrong steps, and failing. However, in the chapter titled Failure is the Way Forward, Mark Manson emphasizes that this way of thinking is completely wrong. The most important path to success is through failure, he says. Failure is an inevitable part of learning and growth. Moving forward without fearing mistakes is what leads to real success. Manson sees failure as one of life's greatest teachers. Failure is not just a mistake or a shortcoming, but an opportunity for progress and improvement. The idea of reaching perfection by never making mistakes only forces us to remain stagnant. But failure shows us whether we are on the right path. Failure is necessary to learn how to take the right steps, Manson explains. Let's think of a story. Jack has always tried to do everything perfectly to succeed in life. He's quickly climbed the career ladder, carefully planning every move. But one day, he makes a big mistake on an important project, and it shakes him deeply. Jack blames himself for the failure and can't cope with it, thinking his career is over. After some time, he reads Manson's book and comes across this sentence: "Failure is the only way forward." This sentence sparks a major realization in Jack's life. Once he starts learning from his mistakes and improving himself, he advances in his career far beyond where he was before. According to Manson, most people think success is a straight line, but the reality is that the path to success is full of twists, turns, and setbacks. Success comes at the end of a process of trial and error, he says. It's impossible to learn, grow, and improve without making mistakes. Those who fear failure are also afraid of taking action. But to achieve success, you must have the courage to fail. Another story is about Sarah. Sarah has been trying to succeed as an entrepreneur for a long time, but she's failed many times. At some point, she considers giving up. She constantly judges herself for her mistakes and failures. However, one day she reads this line from Manson: "The only way to succeed is to fail over and over again, learning along the way." Inspired by these words, Sarah decides to try again. She realizes that every failure is an opportunity to learn. And finally, after persisting without giving up, she achieves real success. Manson explains that avoiding failure actually stops progress and learning. If you're not failing, you're not taking big enough steps, he says. Big successes require taking big risks and being willing to fail as a result. Fear of failure keeps a person stagnant, but failure is a force that propels you forward. In this chapter, Manson argues that we need to change our attitude toward failure. Failure is not something to avoid, it's a process to embrace, he says. Because failure not only shows us what we're doing wrong but also helps us identify what we're doing right. Our mistakes help us take better steps in the future. Each failure moves us closer to success. Another crucial point Manson emphasizes is that our mistakes and failures don't define us. Failure does not determine who you are. Your failures are a part of your progress, he says. A person's failures don't mean they are worthless. On the contrary, failures are part of their growth process. That's why accepting failure and learning from it is critical for personal development. In conclusion, the chapter Failure is the Way Forward explains that the most important path to success is through failure. Manson highlights that making mistakes, taking wrong steps, and failing are all inevitable parts of learning and growth. True success comes from not fearing failure, Manson says. With this awareness, we can take bolder steps in life and see failure not as a setback but as an opportunity to move forward. 9. The responsibility, fault fallacy. When faced with negative events in life, we often look for someone to blame. We say, "This isn't my fault," or we hold others responsible. However, in the chapter titled The Responsibility, Fault Fallacy, Mark Manson explains that taking responsibility is not the same as accepting fault. There is a crucial difference between these two concepts. Just because something isn't your fault doesn't mean you aren't responsible for it. Manson states, something may not be your fault, but it is still your responsibility. Manson argues that understanding the difference between responsibility and fault is essential for personal growth. Fault is usually a concept tied to the past. It determines why something went wrong and who was to blame. Responsibility, on the other hand, is about what you do from this moment onward. Fault belongs to the past. Responsibility is about the present and the future, Manson explains. So, a bad situation you face may not be your fault, but how you deal with the consequences is entirely your responsibility. Let's consider a story. Lisa has been in a difficult relationship for a long time. Her partner constantly criticizes and belittles her. Lisa thinks this situation isn't her fault, and she's right. But Manson reminds her, it may not be your fault, but how you handle the situation is your responsibility. Lisa may not be responsible for her partner's behavior, but it is entirely her responsibility to decide whether to continue or end the relationship. Regardless of who is at fault, Lisa is the one who must take control of her future. Another important point Manson emphasizes in this chapter is that taking responsibility actually brings freedom. Taking responsibility gives you control over your life, he says. If you constantly place responsibility on others, you are also giving away control over your own life. However, taking responsibility means you have control over the events in your life. It allows you to steer your own path. Jack's story is another example. At work, Jack faces a major problem. His project has failed, and he believes he doesn't have the power to fix it. It's not my fault, Jack says. Other team members didn't do their jobs properly, but Manson explains, this situation may not be your fault, but the responsibility to find a solution is yours. This realization changes Jack's approach entirely. Instead of blaming others for their mistakes, he focuses on how to solve the problem. Manson argues that taking responsibility empowers us. In life, many things happen beyond our control. Illnesses, natural disasters, or other people's poor decisions can affect us negatively. But how we deal with the consequences of these events is entirely up to us. Taking responsibility doesn't mean everything is within our control, but it shows that what we do about it is in our hands, Manson says. This perspective frees us from a victim mindset and gives us a stronger, more empowered stance. Taking responsibility doesn't mean everything is your fault. Manson emphasizes that this is a crucial distinction. Taking responsibility doesn't mean blaming yourself. It simply means taking ownership of managing the consequences, he says. So, even if something happens outside of your control, it doesn't change the fact that you are responsible for dealing with it. This realization gives individuals the power to take charge of their own lives. In conclusion, the chapter The Responsibility Fault Fallacy explains that responsibility and fault are not the same thing. Manson highlights that placing blame on others or avoiding responsibility only makes us weaker. Taking responsibility represents strength, not weakness, he says. With this understanding, people can learn how to face negative events in life and gain the power to shape their own future. 10. You're wrong about everything, but so am I. We all like to believe that we're right about many things in life. Our decisions, beliefs, and understanding of the world seem correct to us. However, in the chapter titled You're Wrong About Everything, But So Am I, Mark Manson emphasizes that being wrong is an inevitable part of life, and accepting this is essential. Being wrong is one of the most natural traits of being human, says Manson. It's impossible to always know the truth, and we only grow by constantly recognizing our mistakes. Manson explains that most people have a tendency to avoid making mistakes. You live in a world where being wrong is seen as a weakness or flaw. But according to Manson, on the contrary, being aware of and accepting our mistakes brings true freedom. Thinking you're always right prevents personal growth, he says. Because if you always believe you're right, you close yourself off from learning and self-improvement. Let's imagine a story. Mike is someone who has always seen himself as right. He holds strong beliefs about everything and refuses to allow them to be questioned. But one day, he realizes that a project he had championed and at work is a failure. At first, he tries to blame others and refuses to admit his mistake. However, he then comes across this sentence in Manson's book: the more we accept how wrong we are in life, the more we learn and grow. This sentence changes Mike's perspective. He realizes that by admitting his mistake, he can learn from it. Being wrong isn't the end, it's the beginning of improvement. Manson highlights that our understanding of the world must constantly evolve. The truth is, many things you believe right now will one day turn out to be wrong, he says. This is a natural part of life. As our knowledge and experiences grow, so does our mindset. What you believe to be true today may seem wrong to you tomorrow. Accepting this change is part of personal growth and development. Another story is about Sarah. Sarah is known, in her circle, as someone knowledgeable and intelligent. She has an opinion on everything and often believes her views are correct. But one day, she comes across new information that proves one of her long-held beliefs wrong. At first, she struggles to accept it. Her mind, in an effort to protect itself, rejects the new information. However, later, she reads this line from Manson: "Admitting you're wrong makes you wiser." When Sarah acknowledges her mistake, she becomes more open to new information. She realizes that accepting her errors is actually an opportunity for growth. According to Manson, being aware of our mistakes makes us more humble and flexible. If we refuse to admit our mistakes and always believe we're right, we close ourselves off to other people and new ideas. Admitting our mistakes helps us be more open to other perspectives, he says. When someone is no longer afraid of making mistakes and is willing to accept them, they become more inclined to learn and change. This is also crucial in relationships, as a person who acknowledges their mistakes is more likely to understand others and empathize. Another important point Manson emphasizes in this chapter is that we should avoid the trap of certainty. Everything you think is certain today might one day be proven wrong, he says. Accepting that nothing is entirely certain in life makes us more flexible and adaptable. This is valuable both for personal growth and in our relationships. Insisting on certainty locks us into a narrow perspective. But when we accept that we might be wrong, we can view the world from a broader perspective. In conclusion, the chapter "You're Wrong About Everything But So Am I" explains that being wrong is a natural part of being human and highlights the importance of accepting this. Manson emphasizes that being wrong is not a weakness but an opportunity for learning and growth. Embrace your mistakes, because they will set you free, says Manson. With this awareness, people can become more open to themselves and the world, and more flexible on their journey of learning and self-improvement. Change is the only constant. In life, it's almost impossible to escape change. At some point, we all face change in various aspects of our lives. Mark Manson, in the chapter titled "Change is the Only Constant," emphasizes that change is an inevitable and constant part of life. The only thing certain in life is change, says Manson. Fearing or resisting change only leads to disappointment. True freedom comes from accepting change and growing with it. Manson explains that people often fear change because the unknown is perceived as a threat. Change forces us out of the comfort of the familiar and into the uncertainty of the unknown, he says. However, ironically, fighting against change only makes life more difficult. Embracing change allows us to see the opportunities and growth it brings.